game. Time to play the game.
Hey, how's it going, guys? Luca here of the Waterboy Report, and I got a special guest, Tony, the owner of On Sportsplex 2, and Tony has been telling me that he's been thinking of this idea that he's about to present for a while. He always has a lot to say. He always is very business-minded, and he hopes to inspire many people with this new unveiling of what Tony has for you. So, Tony, tell the people what you've been working so hard for behind the scenes.
So, Luca, thanks for having me. And you know what? As usual, you're an amazing host, and I got to tell you, you inspired me to start my very own podcast. So that's the exciting news that I have for all of your fans and fans of sports and business and entrepreneurship. Hopefully people will enjoy it, they'll learn something from this, and we'll have some amazing guests on, not just sports related, but essentially it'll have to do with business, life in general, and we really can't talk about anything. And the podcast is going to be called Toe Knows Everything.
And I love that because we had that promo piece before, Toe Knows Everything. So what are some of the guests you hope to get on this podcast?
So we're going to have some pretty interesting people. We've got some coaches, some very famous coaches. We're going to have Ben Johnson lined up. We've got Francois Glassman, Mr. Soccer here in Canada. We're working on a pretty special TFC player right now. So we've got a whole list of people that we're hoping to have on for 2019.
And what's the means of the podcast? What do you hope when somebody like me listens or watches your podcast? What do you want them to take away from that?
So one of the main takeaways for me is people gaining knowledge and experience from my over 25 years of being in the sports and recreation business. I've been in fitness and sports and recreation. Straight out of high school, I opened a personal training gym, a boot camp, a health food store, so I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've been involved in education, running programs for municipal governments, but mainly running my own business. And I think we're in the age of the entrepreneur, and I think I got 100%. A lot to share. And you know, you're on that track, so I really admire the work that you're doing with the Waterboy Report, and I hope to inform people and pass on that knowledge and information that I've built up over a quarter century.
That's awesome to hear, man. And I want to actually just stem right into that of entrepreneurship. You had a little bit of a teaching background, in your younger days. So what kind of made you and propelled you to want to become an entrepreneur and do all this with Sportsplex, the amount of success you've been able to have over the past couple of years? What inspired you to do all this, essentially?
So, we hear a lot today about mentors, and I got to say, for me, it was my dad. My dad was an Italian immigrant, came here in the 70s, worked his way up from nothing to being a small business owner, essentially. He was a hard-nosed, hard-ass guy, didn't put up with any shit. He was the type of guy who said, you know what, you're either going to school or work, no nonsense.
I love that.
And basically he mentored me, and through osmosis and from hanging out with him, I essentially learned what it meant to grow and run a business. You know, when other kids on Saturdays and Sundays were at home watching cartoons, I was out with my dad working and hustling. And you know, from 11, 12 years old, I remember working down in Spadina, the textile industry. It's sort of gone today. Today it's full of condos, but back then it was the big textile area of Toronto. And we owned a pizzeria and a cafe. And essentially, I'd walk up and down 6 stories, and I'd supply coffee, tea, and other pastries and desserts to all the people working in the factory. So picture an 11, 12-year-old kid going up, collecting money, providing change, running up and down 6 stories without any supervision. And that's
Remarkable.
The story of my life, and that's sort of where I started. And for me, I want to pass on all of that experience. It's a lot of grit. My dad, like I said, was a no-nonsense guy, a take no shit, no prisoners type of guy. My grandfather spent 7 years in World War II, so they had this military mentality. He didn't spare the rod with me. My dad wasn't afraid about using the metal part of the belt. And I tell you, I love him for that. And for me, it was the discipline that was ingrained in me as a kid that has allowed me to persevere through the good and bad times of business.
Would you say your father was your biggest inspiration?
100%. Still is. He's still hammering away at 76 years old, still
Awesome.
Working, still in business, still here at the Sportsplex. So he's the guy who really inspired me to get into business and follow my dreams. And he was a big dreamer. That was the thing. He would never settle for mediocrity. Never. He was always a guy who dreamed big, and he always said, you know what, you can do bigger, you can do better. even with the Sportsplex concept, that's how we got the name Sportsplex 2. He's like, you got to have 10 of these things, not one. So you Sportsplex 1, 2, 3, and that's the mentality that I was ingrained with.
That's awesome. That's inspiring stuff right there.
Thanks.
When things don't go your way and you hit a couple of roadblocks along the way, how do you push through the wall and make things happen when everything is raining down on you?
100%. And you know what? Life is tough. Life is shitty. Like for me, the biggest experience that really changed the course of my life was when my son Francesco was born. It was our third year of being in business with Sportsplex back in 2007. And essentially, he was born and he had to be rushed to Sick Kids Hospital. He underwent 3 surgeries, and I had to be away from the business for a period of about 6 weeks. That sort of put us in peril because being a fresh new business, being away for 6 weeks feels like 6 years. And I had to put trust in people who essentially were working for me but didn't really have a stake in the business. But I obviously cared about my son way more than the business.
Oh, yeah.
So it was a serious balancing act. But we had to persevere. My son eventually had 3 surgeries. God bless Sick Kids Hospital. We still do a big fundraiser for them every single year, raising thousands of dollars. We do one of the biggest indoor soccer tournaments for sick kids. But he made it through the 3 surgeries. He was okay. I went back to business, worked twice as hard to get back on track, and we're here today. We went from our first unit, which was about 2,000 square feet, to a 10,000 square foot unit, to a 20,000 square foot unit, to an 80,000 square foot complex. So it's been a real progression.
That's remarkable. That's
Thank
really
you.
touching story. What do you hope to accomplish more of in the future, and what are your ultimate goals? Not only for this place, but you as a person. Like, what do you want your legacy to be remembered for on this earth?
You know, when I was younger, I was chasing different things. And as a young man, you might want to chase money, you might want to chase fame, you might want to chase all the shiny things. Now it's about a legacy, about making sure that my kids see me as their role model. I want to pass that on to them. I'm trying to ingrain the same values that my dad instilled in me. I've got my kids working here on the weekend. And,
Yeah.
you know, people say, you know what, you're slave driving those kids. It's child labor. I say, that's the best labor. It's free. But in all seriousness, you know, I just want to teach them. I want to teach them that nothing in life is free. You got to hustle every single day. And when you think you're doing well, you're not there yet. And you can never rest on your laurels. You got to push to get to that next level. So for me, it's always about doing better and never quitting. Like I said, my dad's 76, still pushing ahead. And for him, he's never going to quit. And I feel the same way, and I just want to pass on that same passion that I have for business and working with people and working in the sports industry to my kids.
And Toe, I'm going to put you on the spot here. What are your top 3 keys to success? If you had to go on record and say it right now.
For me, you know, it's something that I've always said, and I said, you know what, eventually I'm going to write a book, and it's going to be based on all the lessons that my dad taught me from the barber's chair.
I'd buy that book.
It's going to be called Son of a Barber. So
I love that title already.
You know, I remember being a little kid and people laugh about it, but I remember being like 6 years old back in the 70s, and guys were smoking in the barber shop, looking at Playboy books.
That's how it was.
And I was sweeping hair and, you know, listening to all these guys talking about going to the racetrack and putting bets. And I think being an immigrant kid gave me that big advantage. And I think immigrants have a massive advantage because they're not complacent. They're hungry. They're ready to go above and beyond what it takes to survive. They want to be successful. They've already taken a massive leap, most of them coming to a country where maybe they don't understand the language 100%, maybe they're not aware of the culture, but they take that risk, that challenge. So the rewards are there for people who take risks, and I think you got to take risks. I think you can't be fearful, and you got to work harder than the guy next to you and the next guy and the next guy, and that's the key to success. There's no magic pill, no bullet. There's no bullshit remedy. There's no funnel. There's none of that shit. It's just work, network, provide good service, and hustle. And eventually, over time, you're going to make it.
I think you have a long future ahead in this business.
Thanks. We should have a beer.
Yeah, we should. What do you have right here? You got Corona?
We got Corona. We got Moosehead.
Moosehead,
we got Organic Mill Street, who is going to be our sponsor. So Mill Street, this one's for you.
That's awesome, man.
So let's.
I gotta have a bottle opener.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
He uses his bare hands.
That's it.
Toe knows everything. So, guys, you know the content, the messages, the meanings you will get in all these podcasts. He sold me. I'll be listening every single week. Cheers. Cheers to everybody at home.
For all you vegans, sorry.
Tell the people when they can expect these podcasts, these weekly podcasts. What day? Where can they find you?
So the podcast is going to be weekly. It's going to be right here. It's going to be live from Sportsplex every week on Tuesday at 8 p.m. You'll find us on YouTube. The podcast name is Toe Knows Everything. So if you go on YouTube and you look Toe Knows Everything, you'll find us. Going to be some really exciting guests, some great insights, some amazing information. And guys like you, Luca, really inspired me to get into the podcasting. I'm not from your generation, but I learned a lot from you. And I know the social media is the way, it's the outlet. And you taught me that, so I want to thank you for that.
I want to thank you, man. Thank you
All
for
right.
doing this. And guys, Toe Knows Podcast coming to you in 2019. You definitely don't want to miss it. Cheers to that.
Cheers.
Salute.
It's all about the game and how you play it. All about control, and if you can take it, it's all about your debt. And if you can pay it, it's all about pay. And who's gonna make it?